Ding dong, the veteran gun ban is dead. Last Friday, GOA forced President Biden to sign this provision into law by inserting it into a must-pass bill. Now, VA is prevented from setting veterans' names to the NICS prohibited persons list for simply having a financial advisor. This is a major pro-gun victory, especially during the most anti-Second Amendment presidency we've ever had. Today on the Minuteman Moment, I'm going to break down how GOA's lobbyist team fought to have this rule stopped with a leftist-controlled Senate and presidency. I'm Ben Sanderson, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. Now, we've talked about the Fiduciary Rule before, but if you're not familiar, here's a quick rundown. The Department of Veteran Affairs decided in the 90s that veterans who had a financial advisor to help them with their benefits could be considered mental defectives. This is the same language to describe someone who's been sent to mental institutions. Over the past 30 years, the VA has sent over 250,000 veterans' names to NICS, prohibiting them from owning firearms. But we finally stopped this rule. So let's start at the beginning. Here's how the VA's veteran disarmament program first began. As soon as NICS was created, anti-gun states and federal agencies began looking for records to include in the registry. The Clinton administration directed its bureaucrats to look for names and records of anyone who could possibly fit into one of the prohibited persons categories. Now, most agencies didn't have any real criminal records, but some anti-gunners over at the VA had this twisted idea. Why don't we take the names of 83,000 veterans who used a fiduciary to handle their VA benefits and ban them from having guns? Basically, the Department of Veteran Affairs looked at a prohibited persons category list in federal law, which bans firearm ownership for anyone who's been adjudicated as a mental defective or has been committed to a mental institution, and applied it to veterans who had fiduciaries. It almost sounds too crazy to believe that government employees would be fishing around for veterans to disarm. But check out this story from 2015. John Arnold of Priest River, Idaho, was one of these veterans who needed a fiduciary to take care of his benefits after suffering a stroke. And oops, guess that gives VA the right to immediately take his guns away.
In September, John Arnold had a stroke, and an assessment through the VA resulted in a determination that Arnold could not manage his affairs, an assessment in direct violation with the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, saying he could not own, buy, or sell any firearms.
People let the small stuff go by without fighting it. The other stuff that you don't see gets bigger and bigger and more dangerous. And it amazed me when all these people showed up. It really did. And I'm real thankful.
But John Arnold and the 83,000 vets I mentioned earlier aren't the only ones to be affected by this rule. In fact, the VA Fiduciary Rule has put over 250,000 names into the prohibited persons list. But as always, GOA opposed this action immediately. This action made veterans second-class citizens unable to exercise their constitutional rights. The next attack on these veterans was the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007, or what GOA refers to as the Veteran Disarmament Act, because it helped codify the VA Fiduciary Rule and justify VA's actions. GOA opposed this bill from its inception when other gun groups and politicians wouldn't. In fact, Nancy Pelosi played cat and mouse with GOA for years while we blocked the passage of this legislation. This bill would have never passed until GOP leadership struck a deal and let the House and Senate both pass it without recorded votes. It was outrageous. So way back then, the NICS Improvement Amendments Act of 2007 made this VA Fiduciary Rule worse by putting in writing that veterans could legally be declared incompetent by a bureaucrat. Ever since this betrayal, GOA has been fighting for the passage of the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act. GOA was successful in getting this passed in the House in 2017. Our fix wouldn't allow bureaucrats to make decisions about veterans' gun rights, just as Congress had originally intended. This bill unfortunately stalled in the Senate, but GOA never gave up. A few years later, during the entire Trump administration, GOA fought to have the VA change the process from within. Gun Owners of America teamed up with the Independence Fund, a veteran service organization, and made a formal petition to VA to initiate a rule change. The VA could have easily done a quick rule change, just like Biden's ATF always seems to be doing, except this time to restore gun rights. We even got 21 pro-gun congressmen to back our petition for a rulemaking. They even wrote a letter of support to President Trump saying, Gun Owners of America and the Independence Fund recently filed a rulemaking petition asking VA Secretary Robert Wilkie to do just that. We urge you to take this long overdue action to respect the rights of veterans to keep and bear arms. Representative Chip Roy also teamed up with the now retired sponsor of the original Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act to demand President Trump act too. Tragically, it wasn't enough. Okay, so now we've got a history of GOA's action leading up to this victory. Let's get into how we actually won this time. Starting in the 117th Congress, so 2021, we worked with the House Veteran Affairs Committee to plan out what our mission and goals would be. Thankfully, the chairman of the committee, Representative Mike Bost, was open to the idea and ready to fight for our no-compromise approach to ending this rule. This is the way a lot of different bills get moving. It starts with a conversation between us and a congressman's office or a committee to start planning everything out. Now, it's not always smooth sailing, and sometimes there's disagreements on the best way to do something. But GOA's lobbyists are there to educate Congress on the Second Amendment issues every day of the year. So let's skip a little bit ahead in the year. If you remember, there was a committee hearing that we covered where Chairman Boss, Rep. Rosendale, and other members of Congress met to mark up, aka review, Chairman Boss' Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act.
I'm going to probably be somewhat contrarian here, but I believe there are no constitutional rights to due process or to ownership of guns. These rights are inalienable and pre-exist the Constitution. The Second, Fifth, and 14th Amendments don't grant those rights. They restrain the federal government from impinging upon those rights. And that is what is not being provided by the current fiduciary program. The fiduciary program is effectively a gun control program. It does not matter who takes away the gun rights.
During that hearing, the VA representative looked like a government drone who simply followed what was written decades ago and didn't care that veterans were losing their rights for accessing the benefits they earned. After that hearing, Chairman Boss introduced his bill as an amendment to the Veteran Affairs Annual Funding Bill, where it passed in the House in a bipartisan vote. But that vote wasn't without its whiners. Take, for example, Rep. Wasserman, who had the audacity to say, actually, under the law, they're not allowed to have guns.
In assigning a fiduciary, VA must also report the beneficiary to the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, the NICS system, as under the law, they are adjudicated as mentally defective. This reporting prevents the beneficiary under federal law from purchasing a firearm.
Come on, Congresswoman Wasserman, you know that adjudicated as mentally defective by some VA bureaucrat is the same standard as me adjudicating you a moron. But wait, there's more. After the House bill passed, Senator Kennedy also introduced an amendment to the Senate's version of the VA funding bill. This also passed in a bipartisan manner, and with the House and Senate version of this amendment passing, it should have been a done deal, right? Well, it almost wasn't. With all the negotiation back and forth on the individual funding bills being rolled into a combined package of 6 bills. And for those of you who haven't been laser focused on all the funding and budgeting battles, since you've got better things to do, like dry firing, spray painting your guns, or literally anything else, it's always a crazy guessing game on what of the original bills will make it into the final mega funding bill. That's why GOA pushed Speaker Johnson to include the provision to stop the VA from setting veterans' names to NICS. And bam! Our rider made it into the cut, along with a $122 million budget cut to the ATF. Now, this was far from a perfect pro-gun win. The swamp also included a 7-year reauthorization of the unconstitutional Undetectable Firearms Act of 1988. So GOA could not support the whole package in the end. Many GOA allies voted against the final bill because of the gun control. On the other hand, because our GOA-backed amendment was in the bill, it was still enough to make anti-gun politicians and groups enraged. Democrats started voting no on the bill because it was too pro-gun. Even better, President Joe E.P. Biden had to bite the bullet and sign this bill into law with our pro-gun provisions. Forcing Biden to sign pro-gun legislation was a huge win for not only veterans, but gun owners everywhere. But the fight's not over. GOA is committed to making the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act into permanent law, the ATF fully defunded, and the archaic Undetectable Firearms Act of 1988 is declared unconstitutional and repealed. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of GOA's latest fights for your rights.